So yeah, let's figure out what we want to talk about today. I got one thing that I've been talking about a little bit lately, and maybe you can tell me what you think about it, and then maybe you can tell me if anything's been on your mind lately,
Okay.
and we can just see where we go.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is this idea of a true self, right? And and you have your true self, but then you have like I almost think of it like these outcroppings that develop in response to something hard that happened in your life, right? Uh, there's a mixed martial artist named Sean Strickland, and I watch a lot of mixed martial arts.
Okay.
You know,
I know who he is.
you know who he is.
Yeah.
He is abrasive and crass, and I really, really, really didn't like him. Like he's not my style of guy, and he's still not. But it was interesting. He goes on Theo Vaughn's podcast. You ever heard of Theo Vaughn?
I know who he is. I never listened to him.
Yeah, I actually really like him. I went and saw him in he came to the amphitheater in Zion outside of the Zion National Park. Dude, I laughed. You ever laugh so hard you get mad at somebody? Like when you're a little kid and they tickle you too
Yeah,
much
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's
And
not
you're like,
fun
and you're
anymore.
like, stop it.
Like it's not fun.
Yeah, that's what my brother used to do to torture me as a little kid.
Right, right. So I'm watching Theo Vaughn and dude, I am getting angry at how hard I'm laughing. Side note. Theo Vaughn does something really special. I've seen him do it twice. He takes, and I don't think it's a thing he intentionally does, but he just does this to people. He takes people that are really kind of hard and closed off, and they got a shell on them, and somehow he puts them at ease, and they just start sharing their most personal stories.
Okay.
He did it to Sean Strickland, and he did it to a guy named Tony Hinchcliffe, who's a very abrasive comedian also. And they just start talking about their lives. But Sean Strickland gets on there. He's the brashest, rudest, crassest person ever. And he just starts to talk about childhood trauma and how his dad used to beat the hell out of him and how his brother used to sit next to his dad with a knife in his waistband, and his brother was thinking about how he was going to stab his dad because he hated him so much. You know, like
Yeah, hard stuff.
intense stuff. And he just starts to cry, right? And it doesn't make the way that Sean Strickland is abrasive okay. It doesn't make it the right way to be in the world, right? But I guess for some reason, if I understand a person and I understand how they became the way they are, then it's easier for me to palate it. And maybe even
Yeah.
I feel like it allowed me back to that original idea. It allowed me to see through this outcropping of like a way that he deals with the childhood abuse that he went through. And I can see past that and I get to see the true person. I get to see Sean Strickland. And he actually, like in my appraisal, if you watch him long enough and you pay attention, he's got a lot of integrity. He really has values. He wants to be a good person. How he's going about it is definitely controversial and up for, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, and I think some of that, especially with those people who are promoting fights like that, part of it, I wonder how much of it's for show.
Yeah, and
You
that's
know what I
maybe
mean?
the
Like they're
fun
trying to
part.
they're trying to drum up. It's like, I mean, I guess we're gonna start off talking about martial arts. It's like,
Yeah.
like you have like Conor McGregor who's
Yes.
way overboard, right?
Oh,
Like in a way.
he jumped the shark a long time ago.
Yeah. But then you have like, like you have him, when he fought Khabib, he's talking bad about his religion. He's talking about his father who died.
Yeah.
Like if ever there was a time to be sensitive,
Right.
And so, Khabib doesn't say much, but then he's in the fight, and then he's like smashing him, and he's like, let's
Let's talk
talk,
now.
let's talk now. And then, and then Connor's like, it's all just business.
Right.
Well, it wasn't business to Khabib.
No, Khabib.
Like I saw him on
operates
Tyson, and he was like,
more genuinely.
yeah, and he was like, if there was no security guards, like if there was no officials, and we're like, what would have happened? And they're like, well, you would have killed him.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yeah.
So anyways, I just wonder like how much of that, I mean, it's coming from somewhere, right? But then there's like a performance for an audience.
I don't think there's any performance to crying about your childhood trauma.
No, that's
right?
that's where you get into like maybe
out.
Yeah.
Well, and I get a lot of that with Sean. I actually think that he doesn't want to be put in a vulnerable place, and so he's very aggressive even in the way he interacts with people verbally.
Yeah.
And he pushes the envelope and things like that. But and that is maybe a fun part of, like, to me it's a fun part of mixed martial arts, of trying to separate out the true person from what's just show, and the different ways they approach it. And some people are, well, I'm an entertainer and I'm gonna be this character, and other people go, I'm gonna be me and we're gonna fight, and if I win, then I keep fighting and I keep getting contracts and I get paid more, and I don't have to be fake to do this. Right? It's trying to separate that out. But
yeah, so like when you're talking about the true self, then like, bring it back to that. Like, what are you thinking about with that, as far as?
I just think it's a fascinating thing in a few aspects. Like, how often do people not know that that's not who they are? Sean Strickland, when he won I don't know if you know much about this, but he got a last minute fight against Israel Adesanya, and Israel Adesanya had been the dominant champ for multiple years. And the only reason Sean Strickland got the fight is the guy that Israel Adesanya was supposed to fight had an injury. And they're like, well, they got the card coming, and like people are gonna show up, and there's an event to put on, and they needed a fighter, so they call Sean. There's no way that he would ever be in a title fight by his merits. They just needed someone who would say yes, right?
Right.
And he goes, yeah, I'll say yes. And he goes out there, and in my opinion, he pulled off the biggest upset in UFC history. Like, just hands down, shouldn't have won the fight. And it wasn't a fluke. Sometimes, like, you got like an old fight, like George St. Pierre fought Matt Serra and was dramatically better, but Matt Serra got a lucky punch in and knocked out George St. Pierre. And then they fought again, and GSP beat the brakes off him, right? This was not that. Yeah. Sean Strickland was the better fighter. 5 rounds straight, beat him. Biggest upset in UFC history. And afterwards, in his brash kind of way,
bravado, yeah,
he's going, thanks, Dad. Thanks for being such a piece of shit and beating the hell out of me when I was a kid. Look what it did for me. Look where I'm at, right? And he's being sarcastic. But there is this thing in him that goes like, that made me this. And I think I would challenge that. Maybe at one point it pointed him in that direction, but I think that he would be a great fighter even if he wasn't abused as a kid. You know what I mean? Or maybe that was a part of his story, but it doesn't have to be a part of it now. Like, he would be a great fighter even if he could forgive his father and not feel hurt and torn up by it. And like, he would still be who he is. And he doesn't have to be this outcropping of a defense mechanism that responds to the trauma that he went through.
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting. Like, would he be the same person if he didn't have that? Like, if he had a comfortable life, would he become who he was? Like, I mean, obviously this is all hypothetical, so it's like, it's impossible to know. But I mean, a lot of those people that end up being great come from very terrible situations where they have to overcome that. And if he's in a space where he hasn't, I mean, he might still be like, he still might be like relying on that, in order to
Yeah.
fuel himself for like what he's doing, like there's, yeah. No, I mean, I think about it. So I follow fighting like loosely,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I do follow ultra marathon running because I participate. I mean, I do ultra marathons.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's interesting in it is like, why do people get into it?
Uh-huh.
And a lot of times you get people who get into it because they're trying to work through something. And for whatever reason, they instinctually, like, this is what they go to. Maybe it's like, maybe you're running from something and you're physically like
Yeah.
like you're running. Like, but I know a lot of people who, maybe not a lot of people, but I know people that it's like they got into it because they had a drug habit or they had something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, they were trying to take from like a negative habit that they had to making it into a more positive one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember like I listened to like a lot of Rich Roll, and he was interviewing this guy named Ken Rideout, who he's like 50 something, and he's like the world champion, like master marathoner. He runs like a 2:30 marathon. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
But so Rich Roll just starts asking him these questions because he comes from this traumatic background, growing up in Boston and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like he starts asking him the questions like, are you still like running from that childhood?
Yeah.
Has that been put in its appropriate place? And he's like, honestly, I don't know. And it's like, well, if you don't know, the chances are you don't, like, you haven't
Right.
you haven't moved past it. And he said, like, well, I'm scared that if I do move past that, all of my drive and ambition will go away.
That's the part I'm curious about. See, I'm actually, because originally when I talked about Sean Strickland, you were like, well, did he have to go through that to become that? My question is actually more present tense. That got him to where he is. Does he still need it? Does he still, right? Like, would he lose his edge if he was at peace and didn't have that trauma haunting him anymore?
No, I mean, that's a hard question. Like, only that he would answer. No, I mean, from what Rich Roll was saying and talking to other people about it is that he's like, I haven't found a single runner that's actually done the work and come to peace with their traumatic background that is worse. He's like, if anything, they become better because it frees up space.
That's my hypothesis with Sean Strickland.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that he doesn't need that anymore. He doesn't need to have the bravado and all this. He would be a great fighter still if he could put that away.
But it's also like his journey, and he's probably not ready for it, like for that. Like myself, like I got into ultra running, and I mean, it's a weird thing to be part of because it's like the amount of suffering that you can reach is like pretty crazy. And you saw this because you've come out and crewed me when I've done 100-mile races, and the absolute like just misery and pain towards the end of it. But I started doing it like just trying to work through my own like trauma of like a toxic like prior like marriage. But it was like something that I felt to do because in my navigating that difficult relationship, I personally just made myself smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And I had taken a class that was like on trauma and healing, and the teacher had said like he's like trauma is. He's like these are experiences that completely overwhelm like the system, your body. And he's like, and he's like, it's very hard for words to get you out of that. He's like, you're not going to think your way out of it. You didn't think your way into it. He's like, and it happens to like all of you. And he's like, in my experience, he's like, you have to find something that will override that, because ultimately trauma makes people feel small and vulnerable and helpless and all of these things, which I was very in touch with. And so he was saying that like for him, and he grew up like in the Philippines and was like, there's like civil war and crazy
Mm.
stuff happening, right? And he's like, but I always felt like I was garbage.
Mm.
And so he's like, so what I did was, he's like, what I felt that I needed to do was, he's like, I would actually go like hop into dumpsters and gather stuff out of the dumpsters, and I would turn them into these collages.
Mm.
So I was taking garbage and
Making
making
it
it something
beautiful.
beautiful. And he's like, I did that for like 3 years.
Wow.
And he's like, and I gave away every single collage to friends.
Yeah.
And he's like, and then finally, he's like, I did this one last one, and then it was like, I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like he's like, I had transformed my life from feeling like that it was garbage and
Yeah.
useless to that it was like that I had worked through that,
Right.
And so like I got into ultra running like because I wanted to do something that it was like, okay, you're not powerless.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I know that it's still like a process for me. Like it's not something that I've like worked through. Like I wouldn't say I've come to like an authentic, true self, like because of it. Maybe part of it is that I'm, instead of like using the running to try to address it, like maybe I'm still just like running away from my own past.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's hard to tell. But I'm pretty sure that it's not like something like, because I can still feel it like when like I start to have like a somatic response
Yeah.
to something that triggers it, and then that lets me know like, okay, it's in there
Something's going on
somewhere. Even though
yeah.
my life is very good now, I have an amazing wife and kids and stuff, but it's still in there. And so I mean, it's very interesting, like in the case of like Sean Strickland, that it's, if he was abused, that then he would turn to fighting.
Yeah.
But it's probably he was drawn to it because he probably felt helpless for whatever reason, especially if there was like siblings involved who were also helpless. If he had a brother that was considering stabbing his dad,
he told
I don't
a
know if
story.
his mom was involved.
He told a
And
story.
that's where it starts to get really.
That he would sneak into his mom's room because he thought that his dad was going to kill his mom. And that one night he snuck in there and he was hiding under the bed. And he said, it was just a really low socioeconomic, like, he said there was bed bugs and fleas jumping on him under the bed, right? Like it was not a clean, high functioning house.
Yeah, you don't want to stay there.
And he hears his dad start to like choke his mom and start to threaten to kill her. And he comes climbing out from under the bed and smashes a guitar over his dad. Anyway, just that kind of thing. Like it was, yes, people were threatened.
Yeah, and so like the helplessness, particularly I think like when it's a father and it's abusive to not only the kids but to the mother, like the helplessness that people feel in that.
Yeah.
But it is curious, like it is curious that he would then turn to fighting. Yeah. But it's probably because he's still fighting his dad. It's probably not even fighting any of these people that are in front of him. If he's just won the belt and he's still addressing his dad, you know what I mean? Like that's like some raw, real stuff right there.
Yeah. But it is a fascinating point because I know in my own life, the things that were harder for me, the relationships that were harder, I can work through those in a way that I'm actually really grateful for those experiences over time. Like it's not easy to do immediately. So no experience, at least, I don't know, tell me what you think about this, but no experience in our life is necessarily good or bad. And maybe it's just how we respond to it.
No, I mean, I agree with that. Like I look back and it's like, do I wish like as a 27-year-old that I didn't get married and spend 13 years of my life in a very hard relationship? I mean, on the one hand, there's no point, right? Because I can't go back.
Right.
I made that decision. That decision. When I made that decision, did I make the right choice? Like probably not. I can't really say much more than that. But do I look back on it and do I regret my life?
Yeah.
No, I don't regret my life.
Yeah.
Do I feel sorry for like young Brett and the situation that he got in that was way more than he could handle? Yes, sure. But um, yeah, there's kind of no point, you know. Like it's like your life is what your life is. You either learned from it and gathered some wisdom, or it's just not dealt with yet.
Yeah.
You know, like that's how I see it. So do I regret it? No, I don't. Like I don't regret it. Do I wish it had gone otherwise? I don't even engage in that like mental activity
Yeah.
because there's not a point. Like I'm like I don't have a time machine. All I
Right.
have is like right now, and to the degree that it impacts me in my life now, that's what I have to have responsibility for.
And that is something I think about a lot. I talk about memory sometimes with like patients and stuff.
Yeah,
And there are aspects of memory that are concrete, meaning you were 27 when you got married. That's a fact, right?
correct.
You, it was, there was things about it that are unchangeable, but there are actually huge, in fact, the majority of your experience through that hard time is malleable to a degree because the fact that it happened
Yeah,
is concrete. What did it mean that it happened? What did it mean about you?
right.
What did it mean about the people in your life? What did it mean about the world?
Yeah,
Those are not concrete. Those are experience, perception, and they can be shaped and molded over time to something that is valuable and maybe even, I don't know that you would ever be like, I'm glad that happened to me, but you can tell me what you think about this. Not necessarily I'm glad that happened to me, but I responded to the fact that that happened to me in a way that I grew, and I like the way that I grew from that
yeah,
challenge.
yeah. No, yeah. I mean, it's like even when you look at like eyewitness accounts, like for police, like they've shown
Mm,
like psychologists have shown that like eyewitness testimony is very suspect.
especially in times of high
A high
stress.
stress
In fact, the
situation.
cognitive brain just shuts off.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And so it's like even in those situations, like it's very suspect the way that our memories work and the way that we
Right.
remember things. And so in our own lives where we feel like we have like a concrete like story, it's not really as concrete as we thought. It wasn't really concrete when we were even like going through it. There are like facts, like you can look like, did a marriage happen? Yes,
This time of day,
yeah, this time of
where
day, like
were
yes,
we?
like this happened, like there's those kind of things, but most of the relationship is, I mean, depending on where you are and the way that you're interpreting it.
It's an interpretation.
And so then it's like, you know, like if you look at like post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic growth, on the growth side of it is you had a traumatic experience and you've been able to process it in some way and it um, be like absorbed into the self
Yeah.
instead of it being like this weird like little side thing that you have like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that kind of like it can get hit and you can feel it, and because it hasn't been like like it hasn't been assimilated, you know, into your personhood yet.
Right.
Because I legitimately felt like, and part of the way that I've told this is like, and then it doesn't make complete concrete sense, but it's like, have you ever read Harry Potter or
I mean, I saw the
you
movies.
saw the movie? Okay,
I
so
have a vague idea. I might understand Harry Potter as well as you understand mixed martial arts.
right.
Like, you know,
So
some of these players.
yeah, I mean, she's written some very deeply like psychological stuff into these books,
Okay.
and then it's very fascinating. But you have Voldemort and Harry, and they're joined together because Voldemort tries to kill Harry when he's a baby, but it's unsuccessful. But
Mhm.
Harry can always feel him, like he has a
Yeah.
scar, and
There's
he can
some
always
kind
feel
of
him. There's a
connection.
connection, right? And then you learn in the story that Harry and Voldemort basically have the same story. They're abandoned as children. They're
Okay.
orphaned. They're raised not loved.
Okay.
Um, and so they're kind of they're the shadow. You know, like they're the same side of they're
Mirror
the opposite side of this,
images.
the same coin, right? And
Chiral centers.
but where does it go from there? Like,
Yeah.
what choices does one make versus the other at the same school, learning the same stuff? And so Voldemort becomes like obsessed with power and his own self-preservation, and he becomes like the shadow of it, whereas Harry has like friends, he like learns to care, and all of these things. But what Voldemort like sets out to do is he wants to live forever, and so he creates what are called Horcruxes, and he shatters his own soul, and then imbues them into these different objects, right? And he hides them, but they're connected to important parts of his life.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
And so he fragments until he's like almost like kind of this like snake-like looking person.
Yeah.
And so what Harry has to do is he has to go and set out and find these Horcruxes and destroy them, and ultimately then Voldemort gets destroyed. But in a way, they're the same person, and this is how he goes out and destroys these Horcruxes that are these basically these traumatic events. And then Voldemort is like assimilated.
Yeah.
Not exactly, because they're separate people, but like if you look at it like kind of psychologically, this is the way that I've kind of analyzed it.
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, I look at myself and I like had fragmented myself into so many pieces.
Okay.
And it was a weird process of gathering myself. And a lot of it was imbued in people. So like when I was gathering strength to try to leave, I had like my MTC, my mission companion, reaches out to me in New Zealand. Yeah. He's in New Zealand, Samoan guy in New Zealand. So here's this period of my life where I was like strong and powerful.
Yeah.
And he was like at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And he reaches out and helps me through this. My Anasazi friends, like you, Richard, and it was like in other people that just kind of started to show up from different parts of my life, and it was almost like gathering up like these Horcruxes to try to put myself back together again.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, and it's interesting from my perspective. Did we already talk? I feel like we talked about this last time, but I'm going to share it again if we did. But having had our friendship get some distance in it, and then coming back to it, it was like somehow you didn't know who you were.
Yeah.
But I did. At least I felt. That's my experience. My experience is like, I know who Brett is.
Yeah.
And I saw this kind of broken, kind of crushed, just barely. Like it was when somebody's struggling so much, you can look at them and see it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're as humans, we're pretty good at being like, if I don't want to share it with you, like I can put a face on.
Yeah.
But there is a point where it's like just visible.
Yeah,
the way you move,
eyes,
the way
you hold
like,
your head.
Just anyway, seeing you and being like, that's not who Brett is. Brett's beautiful and magical and amazing. And I even remember like when I saw you at Richard's house and you kind of had that hug. I almost felt like I wanted to give you your strength back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the hug felt like, hey, you don't know this, but you're strong.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, and it was like, and that's how I felt it. It was like you could see the reflection of people that like they're like, you don't remember, but we do. Yeah. And so it took like a lot of people around. I mean, from my family, friends, to just like constantly be reflecting that. I mean, I know like with you, like kind of the role that you started to take was like, I'd be really down and not know how to get to where I wanted to go. Like I would call you and you'd be like, man, I know you can't see this right now, but and there's a lot of like hard things going on in your life, but it's like, you have a lot of good things, and I can see it. Like I can see like you're gonna get there. And so, like I yeah. Anyways, it was like many times like where I would call you, and it was just like that reassurance that it's like you can get through this. There's good parts of your life. Like I have my wife. My now wife, Brittany, who's amazing, and my son who was coming. Like it's all, I don't know, but it took a lot of people to pull me out of there, and a lot of it was like people that knew better, like that it wasn't like you're not this weak person.
It's a really fascinating thing. I think about it a lot. I think with a lot of humans, maybe even most humans, this is such a fascinating thing. The people that love you the most may see and understand you better than you understand yourself.
Yeah, man, the fruit tree cannot prune itself.
That's cool. Yeah, I've never heard that, but I really like that. But that's,
yeah.
And I think that's for a lot of people. I mean, almost universally, in my experience, like working with people either as a therapist or just people that I care about, almost universally, they're more critical on themselves than they are on others. Like we're very compassionate towards others, and we just beat the hell out of ourselves.
Yeah, we're very harsh on ourselves. Like if the way that we talk about ourselves, if somebody was talking that way about someone that we loved, we would probably fight them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if somebody was talking that way to my wife, the way that I talk about to myself, like
it's not allowed.
Yeah, I would destroy that person.
Yeah.
But because it's like my own self dialogue, like like then I guess you're free to say whatever mean thing you want.
Yeah,
it's interesting that we do that.
I think that's almost a two-edged sword, because I actually think that comes from a good thing that's hard to navigate. If I were to try and identify like the most core experience at the heart of every human that we're all kind of battling, it's that we're a good person who wants to be good and makes mistakes.
Yeah.
And that criticalness, well, I don't think it's healthy, and we need to learn how to be as kind to ourselves as we are to others. I do think it comes because we have this deep, strong, fiery furnace of a core that says, I want to be good.
Yeah, well, and I think that like self-criticism is self-reflection. Like you don't want to, like Socrates says, like the unexamined life is not worth living, right? And so self-reflection is good because you don't want to keep making the same mistakes, and you want to improve in your life. But like any good thing that has like a shadow to it, you could the self-reflection, the examination of your own life can very easily turn into like criticism. And so then instead of it being something that's helpful and helps you grow, it can actually stunt it. So that's kind of the purpose of it, is to stunt it. And so it's taken something that's good, or maybe we'll argue that I'm just being humble, like because I don't think highly of myself. But I don't think that that's what humility is.
Humility is not thinking you're better than others.
Right.
It doesn't mean you don't think that you're good.
Right. No, I mean, I think that you're being humble and honest about like what the strengths and weaknesses that you have.
Honesty, maybe.
Yeah, honesty. Like your relationship with others, your relationship with God, however you want to look at it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's humility. Like being self-degrading is not, but it's like taking the shadow of it.
Yeah. So being critical, if the way we're looking at this is accurate, being critical comes from a good place in us. it has a very healthy role, because the opposite of that, somebody who never questions if they're flawed, you don't want to know that person. In fact, we have a name for it. It's called a sociopath.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's extreme of it, right?
Right.
The narcissist, the sociopath.
Right. And those are people that don't navigate society in a way that's productive or helpful, and super rare. Actual true sociopathy, I actually think usually it's just extreme collusions and hurt
Justification,
and justifications. It's not actual sociopathy, but nonetheless, that's what not being critical looks like. So criticism comes from a good part of us. It needs to be there, but there's definitely a right and a wrong way to be self-critical.
Correct.
And I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are. Like, what are the right and wrong ways to do that?
I mean, I think that it's like, does it lead towards growth, or does it lead towards the opposite, like shrinking?
Yeah. So look at the result.
Yeah, look at the result. Like, where is it leading to? Does it make your soul like get bigger and expand? Do you feel with hope, or do you feel like shit about yourself?
Yeah.
Do you feel small? Do you feel like scared? Like, are you filled with, like, does it fill you with fear? Does it stop you from engaging in things that you want to or feel that you should? Like, you can know it by it's by the fruits of it.
Yeah.
You know, like, and you just have to pay attention to it. And again, like, some of it, if you just kind of externalize yourself and you think about, like, how am I engaging with myself? Am I engaging in a way that if you, with your very best friend or your closest loved one, and you were trying to help them like grow and see themselves like accurately, like, are you interacting with yourself like in a similar way?
Yeah.
or are you just being self-degrading? And that leads to nothing. That leads to stunted growth. It leads to justification for why you're not doing what you should or feel you want to.
Right.
Because you're not good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that helped me a lot in this regard, I'm trying to think how this developed in me, and I'm not sure I'll pin it together, but nonetheless, going through school, and even before I was like in school, I heard about a form of therapy called DBT, which stands for dialectical behavior therapy, right?
Mm.
And I'd be like, dialectical? That's an awful fancy word. What's that mean? Right?
Yeah.
And it was funny because I think it was probably like I'd been in the therapeutic world for like over a decade before somebody was like, well, let me explain it to you in a way that like made sense to me. They go, dialectical, to. It's the ability to carry two opposing thoughts at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a weird thing because you would think, well, like that doesn't make sense if they're opposing. How could you carry them both? But it's actually a pretty, like, if you think about it, it can be a really healthy thing. I'll give you an example. My favorite example of two opposing thoughts is, I'm doing good enough and I need to do better. That doesn't seem like that makes sense or works. They seem completely conflicting with each other.
Yeah.
If you're doing good enough, why do you need to do better? Right? But a human that can do that, I think it's super healthy. Like, can carry both those thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm doing good enough. I should try to do better. That's a healthy thing, right? And for me, the dialectic that kind of helped me with being self-critical, I do have one thought on how, or one place where I kind of saw it develop. I had a mentor who was an older man that walked me through this idea. He says, well, and we can maybe even use, you have a son, right? Soren. When Soren was born, how did you feel about him? Right? Like, first time you met him.
I mean, I'll go back further than that.
Okay.
Like, the first time I was working as a consultant, and so when Brittany went in for the first imaging,
Okay.
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I was in Cincinnati for work.
Okay.
um, and yeah. Anyways, I had asked her if she could wait, but I was going to be there for like 3 weeks, and she was like, I need to know that he's okay. I
Yeah.
need to see him.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, fair enough. But I was like, if you could do me a favor, can you record it?
Yeah.
And so she said, okay. And the nurse, I guess you're not supposed to let people record them, but
Yeah.
she let her record it, and so
Yeah.
she recorded it. And so I'm at the I'm in this really tall skyscraper in Cincinnati, like on the 20th floor. It's like overlooking like the Reds, like their stadium. And I'm just up there by myself, and she sends me these images, right? And I'm just sitting there, like, and see these images because you can clearly see like his face and stuff.
Mm.
And I never thought I was going to have kids,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Because of like my prior marriage, like that wasn't an option. So that was
Right.
part of in getting married before was like, I'm agreeing to not have kids.
Yeah.
And so I never expected that I would have kids. And so that was out of the realm of possibility for me. Well, now I'm looking at the actual face of my son
Yeah.
and seeing that for the first time. And there was the only, it's hard to put it into words, but the way I would describe it is that there's parts of my soul that I didn't know were there. It like shed light in areas of my soul that I didn't know existed.
Yeah.
And that was the first time, like that's where I felt like the first time that I like met him.
Yeah.
The birthing process was like a whole nother like just like kind of crazy overwhelming thing, but that one just like, and there's something in the quietness of it because it was just me and these images like sitting up in this building and feeling it,
Yeah.
not worried, not like like sometimes like parents talk about being like scared of being a parent. In that moment it was just like an overwhelming sense of like, I don't know, it was just like I don't know how to describe it. It was just like my soul felt like bigger and fuller.
How important was Soren in that moment?
I mean, he was everything.
How deserving of love was he?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted nothing but the best for him. I wanted him to be safe in this world because it is a bit of a crazy world.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this question. This is the question that my mentor posed that kind of helped me with this. What had Soren done to earn that love?
I mean, he existed. Like that was it.
One thing that helped me navigate being self-critical was this kind of thinking. You don't earn love. You don't have to be good enough to get it. You were born having done nothing to earn it. And you were loved and cherished in a very powerful, meaningful way. You hadn't even met him in person. He wasn't even born yet. And he changed another human in a deep, profound way.
Yeah.
And I think for me, somewhere in there, I just came to the conclusion that I am good and deserving of love, and I don't have to earn it, and I can't lose it. And if I work from that position, then everything else is just, hey, you're learning and growing. Stay engaged. Don't be ashamed. Don't be guilty. Just keep trying because you are good. You don't have to earn it. It's just, I think of it, I like the word inherent. You have inherent worth in all humans. This is the way I find it valuable to walk through life.
Yeah.
All humans have that inherent worth. And they may be struggling. They may even be doing things that hurt others. It does not negate that that's what they are at their core.
Yeah, there's, like I run, and there's a bike path that runs from like where I live down into Tempe, like near like ASU. And I run or bike, and there's a lot of like homeless people along the way.
Yeah.
And there's like, and when people are very far gone into drugs, like you can kind of see the impact like
Yeah.
on their faces and stuff, and so there's like people that are on meth and like you can just see it, this whole. And I, like as a practice, because it's very easy to just want to not look at them.
Yeah.
They're a little bit scary, like it's a little bit concerned, are they gonna try to jump me or something like that. But as a practice, like it's like I try to look at each of them in the eye, and not all of them look at me, and just say hello. And
Yeah,
it's just
see
like,
them.
yeah, but what I'm trying to communicate to them is that I see you as a person.
Yeah.
Um, like I'm not seeing you as some scourge of society or something like that, but it's like I'm trying to like see you
Yeah.
like as a person, if you're willing to like look at me. um and it always makes my wife a little bit nervous, like you should like don't like interact with them or anything like that, but it's like I'm like, well, these are like, yeah, I mean, these are people. They come from families.
Yeah.
They probably have loved ones around them and stuff. Um, so that, like when you're saying like they're deserving of of love without having done anything for it.
Yeah.
That includes them.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and so.
Well, and if you look at them and you go, who is that? Are they the homelessness? Are they the drug use? Is there something deeper that's the real them? Coming back to our
Yeah, somewhere in there, like
right.
somewhere in there,
And
like it's there. And I guess part of it maybe is like it's just it had seeing coming from a place where I felt like so wrecked, and like going back to what we were saying, where it took like a lot of people like reflecting back to me that it's like,
that's not who you are.
That's not who you are. There's more to you. You're stronger. You're better. Like there's all the good in you. Like it took a lot. Now, do I think that my like saying hello to somebody in the morning is going to pull somebody out of that situation? Probably not. But it doesn't.
I'll tell you this.
It doesn't hurt though. Like
it is a small thing. And how big are you in their world? You don't know their name. You're just passing them.
Yeah,
it's not anything. That interaction reinforces in a very small way. I'm not trying to. I know. I'm not calling you a hero, and I know that's kind of where you're headed.
No.
But in a very small way, it tells them, hey, like you're not the things that are hard in your life. There's something. I running past you in a moment, in a small way. I'm saying I see something different.
Yeah, I mean, it's like kind of going back to like our friend Chris Wallace, who when we were working at Anasazi, like, um, so one time a parent who I think was trying to justify like her position and that she had taken against her son.
Yeah.
And so he poses the question: when do you think you stopped seeing your son and you started seeing a drug addict, and do you think he can tell the difference?
Mm.
And that like I don't think she said anything the rest of the day. Like, and Chris was very good at like just kind of destroying people in a
right.
good way. In a good way.
Well, and he had been. It's funny. I just did a podcast with Chris. His father committed suicide when he was 15, right? 16. Yeah. And he carried a ton of anger. And he was 24, going to school, and he's talking to a 17-year-old girl that just had some wisdom to her. And starts telling her about how his dad ruined his life. And she says, no, your dad ruined his life, and now you're ruining yours. And so maybe the reason that Chris can be so cutting is because that moment shifted his perspective on his past and helped him grow. And I think even though it's very cutting.
Yeah.
He's trying to be helpful. And you were saying that. You know?
Yeah, no, I mean, he definitely, but I mean, I think we were all on the receiving end of that at one point or another.
I definitely hated a man so much.
Yeah. He was very good at cutting to the chase, and he wasn't holding anything back because he wasn't trying to sugarcoat anything for anybody.
Yeah.
And you look at, like, again, you're giving some context to a person, like this was serious to him.
Yeah.
You know, like interacting in other people's lives is serious. And so it's not something to toy around with.
Yeah.
And there's certain questions that you can ask that will help somebody get to the truth of the matter. And in that case, like that was that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a power in somebody else seeing you and having a sense of your like goodness, your capacity, and the power that it has to like to bring it on. And it's like you were saying earlier, like I wonder if it's possible, like if we need somebody else in order to do that. Well, we're all in relationship with each other, and it's like we need each other to grow, because a lot of times, like because of our own like distortion and self-deception, like we don't know ourselves very well.
Yeah.
You know, like there's my favorite biblical story, well, I mean outside of the story of Christ, but my favorite biblical story is the story of Adam and Eve. And I've thought about this like quite a bit, is like there's this moment where like after like Satan like tempts them and they partake of the fruit and stuff, and then all of a sudden God's coming down and they're like, oh no, and they like run and hide, right? And so God comes down and is like, you know, Adam, Eve, where are you? And they like come out like of hiding behind the bush, which is, it's a funny thing, right? Because if you think about it, like God knows where they are. Right? The bush isn't obscuring them from God's view. Like He can see it. So what's the purpose of the question? Well, the purpose of the question is like, can you answer honestly, like where you are in your relationship to truth? Which, you know, like depending on, and you can define truth in a bunch of different ways. And I think that ultimately it's embodied in God. And so it's like, in your relationship to truth, can you answer truthfully?
Yeah.
And they're not able to, right? Adam's like, it's because of her, and she's like, oh, it's because of Satan, and Satan has his own excuses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment where they have a chance to be true, they're still hiding.
Yeah.
They're still hiding, because the simple answer would have just been like, oh, well, here we are. You know, here I am. You know, like that's what Jesus answers, where He says, here am I, send me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so He's able to just say, here I am, like with no fear, no trepidation, no justification, no blame, nothing, right?
Yeah.
It's just plain and simple.
Yeah.
But for us, like we get into that same thing where it's like that question, I think, is being asked to all of us all the time.
Yeah.
Every moment. Are you able to show up and be honest in this situation, even if it's being honest about you being dishonest?
Yeah.
And that's it. Like that's the one question that we have to answer over and over again. Like, where are you? In actuality, like, where are you? And if you are like, if you have like trauma and you have all these other things, then you're gonna be like, well, this, my parents, this, my ex-wife, this. And we have all of, but the way to be full is to be able to just say like, and there's a reason why it's the name of God is I am, right? It's just like the question is, where are you? And it's just I am. Like,
yeah.
And if you're filling in anything after that, then you're not true.
Yeah.
You're not like, you're not at a place. Now, like I fail at this.
Oh yeah.
All the time, and all people do, but it's the way that I think about it is like, where are you in this situation?
Yeah.
Where are you? The way I showed up with my son last night when he wouldn't go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I thought that yelling at him would get him to go to sleep. This boy that I love, right?
Yeah, the one that we just talked about.
The one that I just talked about.
The one that's so important.
The one that's so important to me, right?
Yeah.
Like, Was I being true in the way I was interacting with him? No.
Yeah.
No, I failed as a father.
Lost your way for a moment.
Yeah, lost my way. I could see the disappointment in my wife's eyes.
Yeah.
Like, so no, in that moment, was I true? Was I authentic? No, absolutely not.
Yeah. I like the way you walk through that Adam and Eve story. Uh, they're made aware of their nakedness, and so they feel shame, so they hide themselves. God comes down. Where are you? God knows where they are.
Yeah, it's just a bush, I think it's safe to assume that God can see through the bush that He made.
Well, he's and all-knowing, omnipotent.
Yeah.
Right. And the question isn't because God doesn't know where they are. It's for them.
It's for them.
In with themselves. But what I also like about that is the hiding isn't because you can hide from God, but it's because you can try to hide from your own shame.
Yeah.
I was made aware that I was naked. I was ashamed. I was vulnerable. Nakedness, vulnerability.
Yeah.
I want to be good, but I realize I'm not, and people are going to see that about me. I'm vulnerable.
God's going to see that about me.
And the shame is for them, not for God. The shame they feel and the hiding is, I can't tolerate my shame. And the moment that you can say, I am flawed. I did yell at my son who I really love, and it was wrong of me. That's the recentering that I think allows us to walk through life wanting to be good, but not always being good, and to do it in a way, and to not be crushed by the shame and guilt that comes with that. To just know that you are good and dialectic.
Yeah.
And you're flawed.
Yeah.
And the only thing that matters is, do you just keep recentering? Do you wake up in the morning and you go, man, Soren really sucked last night, and my wife was judgmental, so to hell with her too?
Yeah.
Or do you wake up in the morning and go, could have done that better?
Hold on.
Wasn't my best moment.
No.
And that allows you to not need others to be bad and to see them in this negative way, so that you can sit with your... The hiding is for you, not for Soren, not for Brittany.
Yeah.
You're hiding for you because you can't deal with your shame.
Yeah.
But the minute you can step out and say, last night, my wife was right. In fact, thank you, Brittany, for letting me see that the way I acted wasn't me and wasn't what Soren deserved.
It wasn't appropriate.
And it wasn't good.
Yeah.
Now you get to praise her and appreciate her for helping you see the right way to be, right? But if you gotta hide, now you need a reason why it's okay to hide, and you need
somebody to blame. Just like Adam needed Eve to blame. Eve needed Satan to blame.
Sure.
Instead of just taking responsibility for it. And that's probably where, going to your earlier question, where it's like, how do you about self-criticism?
Yeah.
Right? So the question is, where are you? And then are you going to be a victim and blame other people for the situation? Because we only have control over the choices that we make.
Yeah.
Right? Other people can put it, they can cause a fair amount of stress.
Yeah.
But it's in my former marriage, it wasn't a good marriage.
Yeah.
But what am I responsible for? I'm not responsible for her early childhood trauma, even though there was impact on me because it impacted her in extremely unhealthy ways. But I only had control over the way that I responded in every situation. And so when I look at it and say, okay, so Brett, where were you? The truth is that as it became more stressful, instead of growing, I was hiding deeper and deeper in the bushes.
Yeah.
Because it was I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do.
To the point that the Brett I know and love, when I saw him, I was like, that's not Brett.
Yeah, because I was so far I was hiding. I was so deep. I wasn't even just behind a bush. I was in a cave. And
it was dark.
And it was dark. It's cold and dark. Oh, it's cold in there. Yeah, no. So I mean,
just real quick.
But it's the same.
I just realized my phone alarm is going to go off in like 1 minute.
Oh, okay.
And so maybe let me just pause it real quick. Sorry about that. We are not good at production. But you were saying about, and I got to run here in a minute, but I just wanted to let you finish your thought and maybe let us wrap up. You were saying that just as Adam and Eve hid due to shame, the trials you went through in that marriage caused you to hide deeper and deeper. Anyway, I just wanted to let you finish your thought or give a closing thought, I guess.
No, that's kind of it. But it's like that question is the question that we all have to answer. Like, are you true in your relationships with others? Like where are you with that? And that's kind of it. Like, can you see other people as people? Can you recognize this, the spark of goodness that's within them? Or can you not? And if you can't, then you start to engage in all types of justification and blame as to why that person isn't that, and that's like, that leads to all human conflict. It all starts from that. It starts with that objectification to dehumanization of that other,
excused by our own shame.
Yeah, excused by our own shame. And that's where suffering comes from. But most of the suffering that we engage in is of our own creation.
Yeah.
Like there's, I can't remember exactly how the quote goes, but like the Buddha says that there's the initial dart that's thrown at you and it causes like 5% of your suffering. 95% of your suffering comes from your own like rumination of like that event.
Yes.
Because that event it's not here anymore.
Right.
It's gone.
Right.
But we can form our very identities around like our suffering. Like of that initial dart that's thrown. And it's like, it becomes like who we are. Like I remember in grad school, I had a friend, a Jewish friend, and her grandfather was a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
And her family, they were not allowed to, like, they didn't even touch anything that was German. So no chocolate, they wouldn't step foot in a German made car, nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember her telling me this story. And then she's like, before my grandfather died, and then her dad went on to be like a Jewish studies professor, and then she was in grad school, and she said, before my grandfather died, he said, you know what? The truth of the matter is that not all of the Nazi like concentration camp guards, not all of them were bad. Like some of them treated us nicely.
Yeah.
And there's no point in me holding a grudge anymore, and I forgive the German people. Right. And so she says, she's like, my family was so disoriented.
Yeah.
Because our family culture was, so much of it was around him being a Holocaust survivor and against Germans.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't Nazis anymore doing anything, but she's like, we didn't know who we were.
Outside of the trauma.
Yeah, outside of that trauma, without that enemy. Like when he forgave Germans, she's like, it was weird. She's like, we didn't know who we were anymore.
Yeah. And all of a sudden they decided, where am I?
Yeah, where am I? Where are you? Because he had come to this place, like basically answering that question.
Yeah.
And saying, the way, yes, I'm a Holocaust survivor. I went through one of the worst things that humans have ever committed against other humans.
Yeah.
But I haven't been completely honest about the way that I've explained it. Yeah. And so this is the case. Before I die, like this is the case. And he was at peace, but his family was not.
Wow.
Because we can pass those traumas on to our kids.
We can even teach them how to hide.
Yeah, you can even teach them like how to hide. And I remember like thinking like, wow, that is a crazy, wild story.
Well, Brett, in this very moment, I'm thrilled and heartbroken because even in that last little close-up thought you had. I was like, well, I have 6 things.
I know we could keep going
Talk
and going
for hours. I'm excited we're going to do this again.
Yeah.
I thought that was we did no prep. We sat down and said, what are we going to talk about? And I thought that was a really fun exploration of a true self or who we are.
Yeah.
So thanks, man. And I love you to death.
Yeah, I love you too,
Thanks
man.
for being my friend.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for seeing me when I couldn't see myself.
Yeah. Well, goes both ways. Anyway, hope you guys liked it. Talk to you later.
Yeah.